This is Julianne Condia, host of Rewritten. Thank you so much for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Bryce Burge, host of Your Soccer Passport here on Public House Media. After this episode, come join us on a trip around the soccer world as we discuss club and country every Tuesday. Stamp your soccer passport by subscribing on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your Public House Media podcasts. And thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to Let Me Be Forward. I'm your host, Baxter Colburn. Another great episode in store for you this week. We've got a lot of fun things in store, and I am thrilled that you're joining us. Boy, oh boy, a lot to talk about this week on the show, especially as regards to the last three matches. But of course, I know many folks aren't really looking at the team's results the last three games. They're looking more forward to the U.S. Open Cup match, which I know takes place this evening as Forward Madison heads down to St. Louis take on St. Louis FC. Welcome into the show. It is another episode for you presented by Public House Media. I'm your host, Baxter Colburn. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your shows. publichousemedia.org, another great spot to find our content. If you want to follow the show on social media, you can do it at Baxter Colburn, at Let Me Be Forward, and at Maddie Cum, MADDIEKUMM for Maddie if you want to follow her. All right, man, what can I say this week? We've got some great guests for you. We are going to be talking to Jeff Michaud of the wonderful Flamingos, of course, Forward Madison. The midfielder, Daryl Shore, is here, and then the editor-in-chief and the man that makes it all happen for the Cup.us, Josh Hakala, is here this week as well to give his outsider's professional opinion about Forward Madison, not only in the U.S. Open Cup, but also just as a club right now. They've got a lot of national recognition continuing on. We saw U.S. Soccer feature them last week, and it's great to see that this club is growing and people are paying attention. So Josh drops by to give us his professional and honest opinion about this club and their chances in the 2019 Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup. With all that being said, let's jump into some news and notes from around the soccer world. USL League One action this past week saw Orlando get another victory. I promise you that USL League One is very unique, and we continue to keep seeing that as Orlando now has grabbed back-to-back victories. They are at 8 points and now tied with Forward Madison in the standings as far as the amount of points earned, which is a little concerning if you're a Forward Madison fan. But 2 straight wins for the Lions. They get a 3-2 victory over the Richmond Kickers, who are now on a 2-game losing streak. North Texas beats Forward Madison 3-1, which we will talk about later. Toronto beats FC Tucson 1-0. Toronto now in 7th place at 3-3-1 with 10 total points. FC Tucson 3-4-1 with 10 total points as well. Looking down the line on Saturday, Chattanooga finally got a victory, a much-needed win from them. They win 1-0 against Greenville. They are now in 5th place and 11 points, 3-4-2. Greenville in 4th place, 3-4-2 also with 11 points, but a better goal difference by 3. And then Tormenta and Lansing drawing at 0-0, a bit surprising in my book. Tormenta had an opportunity to hold on to the top spot in the league, but because North Texas won and Tormenta drew, now Tormenta sits in 2nd, North Texas back on top of the league with 19 total points after their 3-1 victory. Outside of that, we talked about it last week, Bruce Arena set to make his head coaching debut coming up on the weekend against, who else? The LA Galaxy. So that'll be interesting to see how the Revolution with their new manager do against Bruce Arena and the Galaxy. Looking also at some other soccer news, the Women's World Cup just a couple of weeks away. That will be kicking off in early June. U.S. Women's National Team currently favored to win the tournament, and of course they have every reason to believe that they can repeat as champions. Will they win? I think they've got a very strong chance of at least making the Final Four, but there's always some surprise in every single tournament. Let's dive into the interviews this week. First and foremost, our own Madeline Cum sits down with Jeff Michaud as he talks to us about his time with the club, his time in U.S. Open Cup, and of course, just being a part of Forward Madison. Maddie, Jeff, take it away.
Baxter. I'm here with Jeff Michaud. We are going to be talking about the St. Louis match tomorrow night, and if you're hearing this on Wednesday, it's tonight. We're all so excited, like I said, against St. Louis FC for the third round of the Open Cup. So Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Right, so last Friday, we had the international exhibition, and that had a sold-out record crowd, and now you traveled on Monday to St. Louis. You got there early. Tell me, what's training been like, practicing for your match against St. Louis? These past few games have been, a little bit rocky. What would you say you're focusing on right now?
Training's been very positive, and players are really looking forward to getting out there and getting another chance at a higher level club. On paper, St. Louis is in a league above us, so it's going to be a great test for us. So everybody's really been buzzing. We've just been really focusing on getting back to the things that we were doing well before this couple of games skid. But the energy and the atmosphere of training has been very positive.
And what challenges would you say you face, as Forward Madison is a first-year team, still trying to get the hang of playing together, and you're up against teams, like you said, not only that are now a league above you, but have been playing together for years. What's that like?
It's definitely a challenge, but it's something that we all obviously knew coming in. We all knew we were signing for a starter club. But that's no excuse. It definitely has its ups and downs. I mean, it's something that we really didn't have any expectations from a previous season. We were fresh. There wasn't like we were coming off a winning season and had to live up to that expectations. Obviously, as professional athletes, we all strive to win a championship at the beginning of the season. But it's something that there was no real pressure, happening to live up to certain expectations or anything like that. As far as gelling with a new group, for the most part, a lot of teams that are established, I mean, unless you have a very successful season in the professional game, if you're not getting it done, that they're probably going to bring in somebody to try and replace you that does a better job than what you did. So, with that being said, some of these teams that are established, they bring in a bunch of new players as well. But that's what preseason's really for, is to, no matter where you're at, to get that chemistry with your teammates and create those relationships on and off the field. So it's no different than, going into a new team. I've played for a different team every year of my career. That's just part of the game.
And when you talk about going in, with there's no expectations from the year before or even pressure from the year before, how do you set those expectations, and how do you put that pressure on to ensure that you all perform at the highest level you can and as a team at the best as you can?
Like I said, I mean, in this job, it's something where if we don't perform, like I said, you can be replaced at any time. There's players all over the world. You have to push yourself in order to keep a job, or even better yourself, to try to get to a higher league. Like I said, we are the lowest professional league here in America, and me and everybody here, none of us want to be essentially at this level for a very long time, or we all have those goals and aspirations to reach, a higher level, whether it's here, over in Europe, And by doing that, you have to be successful on the field. And that's with results, getting stats for yourself, for the team. You can't be complacent in this game, otherwise you're going to be replaced quicker than you found yourself in the situation that we are.
And, there is, like we talked about buzz a little bit earlier in the interview, there is so much buzz around this game, especially since, it's all over Twitter. Even people are saying this is the biggest game that Forward has faced so far. And if it's successful, Forward will not only play an MLS team, but that could potentially be hosted at Breese Stevens. Do you think that would be the biggest turnout game over the international exhibition last week?
Oh, without a doubt. Obviously, anytime you're going to potentially play an MLS team, a meaningful game is always going to have a bigger buzz than an exhibition game. That's no knock against Hertha Berlin. They're obviously at a higher level than an MLS team would be. But with that being said, if it's a meaningful game against an MLS team, that would be fantastic. Not only for the players, but for our fans. It would be a great opportunity for them to see what the highest level is supposed to look like, and also let them know that we're right up there with the highest level. That's kind of been the message from the head coach down the entire year. He wants us to prove that, we're one of the best teams in this league, and not just this league, that this league can also compete with the leagues above.
Yeah, I can't even imagine how crazy the flock and all of the fans would go if that game was here in Madison. That would be absolutely wild. But let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about you. You're someone who you're known to excel in Open Cup games. Your history is scoring 6 goals, and you are someone that says that you show up in big games when it's all or nothing. Tell me what that mindset is like, and why you succeed so well in Open Cup games.
I think it's just the mentality that I have. I'm not scared of anybody, no matter what level. We all put our shorts on the same way. We all tie our shoes. We all wake up in the morning, eat breakfast. I'm not scared of anybody when it comes to that kind of stuff. I am very confident in myself and my ability. I do believe that I can play at that higher level. So for me, those are opportunities for me to prove that, and I certainly do try to prove that to people. I haven't had the professional career that I've hoped for up to this point in my life and my career. And I definitely think I somewhat play with the chip on my shoulder in those games to try and prove and show people that I can play at that level.
Oh, right. And, there is no question that you play a vital role in this team, and I am so excited to hear how tomorrow night goes, and I know just as much as everybody, it would be phenomenal if we could see you guys back at Breese Stevens playing against an MLS team.
That would be awesome. I'm hoping we can get it done, and I'm thankful for all the support that we've gotten so far from the flock and everybody in Madison. It's been awesome.
Oh, it's been super cool to watch, and I'm wishing you the best of luck.
We get ready for our weekly conversation with head coach Daryl Shore of Forward Madison FC. Coming off of a very intriguing last 3 matches. I know Coach and I have had the opportunity to chat a couple of times over the last few weeks, and it's been intriguing to see the results. But first and foremost, very much a welcome into you, Coach, to Let Me Be Forward.
Well, Baxter, as always, thanks for having me, and it's good to be on the show again.
Absolutely, Coach. So, of course, the big match that I'm sure everyone is buzzing about, of course, as we record this, it's the day before the match, but of course this will air on actual match day. But you're down in St. Louis right now, and you gave me the weather report. You said it's hot as you're getting ready to take on St. Louis FC in the third round of the U.S. Open Cup. And I would love to know your thoughts about how you're feeling. It's been a busy last couple of days, not too many days for rest and relaxation.
Yeah, I mean, we're, excited to be down here for the opportunity to play the game. We came down a day early, so we trained in Madison on Monday and then had lunch, got on the bus, and got down to St. Louis Monday evening so we could have a training session on Tuesday and just kind of get a feel for the field. Fortunately, we played here in preseason, so guys have a pretty good idea of what we're getting ourselves into. And again, it's an opportunity for us to play against a team in a league that's higher than us and a chance to move on in a tournament that, you're one game away now from playing MLS competition. So it's a big deal for us, and we come into the game, even though haven't had quite the results we've wanted in our last two league games, still feeling pretty confident about ourselves, and know it's going to be a tough challenge, but at the same time, like our chances coming into this game.
Let's talk about these last couple of games, because obviously I know the Hertha game is hard to really draw too much from, but on paper, you've conceded 8 goals in the last 3 matches, including the Hertha game. You've only scored that one goal that Don Smart scored against North Texas. As a coach, where are the adjustments in your mind that need to be changed? I mean, somebody could say, well, the defense hasn't been good, but another could say, well, the offense hasn't been scoring. But from your perspective, what do you see? What have you witnessed, and what have you tried to tweak in practice?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, to hurt the game, you really can't.
Of course.
You can't really account that into it. Great opportunity for our guys, and an unbelievable experience to be able to play in that game. You look at the goals we gave up in that game, and 2 of them are quality. One of them's a penalty, and then one of them's a bad mistake by us right before the half. But, taking that game out of the equation, you look at the South Georgia game, it's a fluky goal that we gave up off of a set piece where we should have done better in getting rid of the ball, but kind of a fluky thing where that was really their only chance in the game when the game was 0-0. Obviously, they had their chances late in the game where Brian comes up with a big save on the breakaway, but right. That's at the same time when you're pushing the game and now trying to get the goal back, you're going to leave yourself vulnerable in the back, and sometimes you just have to take those chances. So not too worried about that game. Then you go into the Dallas game, and it's a little bit disappointing in the first 2 goals, just from the standpoint of the part of our team that's been good all year has been our defensive group. And now we had a couple of letdowns defensively where they score the first 2 goals, but then we come back and score the goal. At the end of the day, we just didn't have enough in the tank against Dallas. And when you make a couple of mistakes like we did, and give up 2 goals in a 7-minute span, it's going to be tough to come back from. But don't really feel like anything needs to change defensively. We still are believing in the way we defend and the way we stay organized and everything. So, again, haven't really pressed any alarm buttons just yet. Just got to keep staying the course, and our focus obviously is St. Louis, but it's one of those things where we know that if we stay organized and we're disciplined in our shape, then it's still going to be hard for teams to break us down.
Exactly right. And I think that's the biggest part about it. I think sometimes, teams can press the panic button, too early in a season. And we've seen, teams even get rid of managers after 10, 12 games. And it's like, they didn't even get a full chance to, install their system or even really get a time, with the players. And it always is silly to me when I see that happen so early in a season. But once again, that's why they're getting paid lots of money and I'm talking over here. But anyway, it's always intriguing to me. So you go from St. Louis on the 29th, and then a couple of days later you have another big game in USL League One where you have to take on Lansing. And you're not in a must-win situation, but you're in a position where even a point moves you up the table. It's very much like the Eastern Conference in MLS, where one win, all of a sudden you're in the playoffs again. It's ridiculous. But tell me a little bit about the Lansing game. I know we'll have some time to talk. Obviously, we'll reflect on that game next time we talk. But Lansing, of course, drawing over the weekend with Tormenta 0-0. I think some surprised by that. But your thoughts going, obviously you have to flip gears quickly from an important cup game to an important league game back to back.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we know it's not a must-win game, but it's we need to win game. And so, speaking with the announcers that are doing the game against Minnesota or against St. Louis, they asked the question of, are we satisfied with where we are in the table? And obviously, whenever you're sitting in ninth place in a 10-team table, you're not satisfied.
Right.
But when you look at it again, we have a game in hand on a couple of teams. We're 3 points out of the fourth place spot. So now this is a game where if we beat our teams and now have a good chance to move up the table and get into the playoff spot, depending on how the rest of the games go. But we also know that we still have a game in hand. So there's really no need for us to again, press any panic buttons. We do know that this is a big game. We're at home. And we did something in our last league game at home where we talked about not wanting to do, and that's, not defending our home field. So we feel like games at home, we need 3 points in all of them. Sometimes maybe we'll settle for a point, but those really aren't going to be good enough where we really want to push the issue, and we're going to be, dissatisfied if we don't come out of the Lansing game with the full 3 points.
Give me your response to the amount of critics that I've heard centering around the recent play for Mason Toya. I feel like a lot of folks are easy to jump on a young player that's not producing, even though there was a lot of hype around him. And you and I have talked about him before, but I feel like the noise keeps popping up from various things that I see, even after his time when he went back to Minnesota to play, even against Hertha, which is not a clear way to judge a player against, in my opinion. But even though Dane Sinclair played fantastic in that game. But give me your defense, I guess, of Toya so far, because I feel like he's come under a lot of criticism as that main striker, a sense, for Madison right now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, it's probably a good thing that I don't read those things or listen to what other people think about any of our players or anything like that. But to be fair, with Mason, kind of, throwing him into the fire with our group, just as a we're asking him to play a position that, he's not really 100% comfortable playing. And so, you look at his game against Hertha and they start him out on the wing, and he actually has a few moments where he gets behind defenders. And what Mason's really good at is running when he's facing defenders. So we've got to do a better job of trying to find situations for him when he's playing for us to get him isolated and get him into situations where he can be effective in the game. Now, that being said, the last couple of weeks have been a little tough on all of the Minnesota guys because they've been asked to kind of go back and forth, and we haven't seen them in our lineup just because Minnesota's been a little bit shorthanded with some of their injuries and some of their transactions that they've made. So, not getting enough quality time with us, and then he gets to Minnesota and he becomes a practice player, and obviously he plays the game against Hertha, but then goes back to the bench and doesn't get a lot of minutes. And one of the reasons that those guys are in with us is they need games. I mean, they need to play games, and you're not going to get better unless you get a string of games. And we know forwards are streaky. And if you get forwards, when they get on a good run, they can go 5, 6, 7 games where they're scoring goals, and then they can go, the same way 5, 6, 7 games where they're not scoring goals. So if you look at the last game that Mason played for us at Chattanooga, he's involved in the first goal that we score, even though it's an own goal. He makes the play on that. And then the game against Georgia, again, it's one of those where none of our guys had a good day in the attacking half, and we created a lot of chances, and it was one of those nights where it just wasn't going to fall for us. So we've got to do a better job of kind of incorporating him and figuring out where he best helps us on the field. And then at the same time, Mason's got to, he's got to come out now and play with a little more confidence and a little more swagger. And again, if he can get a goal or two, I think you'll start seeing that. But if I'm being fair, like we usually are with all of our players, I felt like the South Georgia game, Mason was actually pretty active and solid in the first half, and then kind of disappeared a little bit in the second half. But again, it's one of those where it's going to take time for him to kind of settle in with our group, and once he does that, we're pretty confident that he'll start contributing in a big way.
Well, Coach, we appreciate the honesty and the continued growth of the club and all the hard work that you put into it. So appreciate the time again, as always, sir.
All right. Well, appreciate you having me, and hopefully next week when we're talking about advancing in the Open Cup and 3 points at home against Lansing.
Looking forward to it, Coach. Good luck against both St. Louis and against Lansing.
All right, Baxter. Thanks, and have a great night.
You too, sir. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, we've got more in store for you as we dive into a little bit more about the U.S. Open Cup with Josh Hakala from thecup.us. That's coming up when we return on Let Me Be Forward, presented by Public House Media. All right, Coach. Appreciate the time.
All right, Baxter. Have a good one.
Good. Have a good night.
All right. Take care. See ya.
As the U.S. Open Cup continues to roll on, Forward Madison now finds themselves with an opportunity to make history once again as they take on St. Louis FC this evening. And it's intriguing because one of the many folks that is covering the U.S. Open Cup is probably what many of you folks get your U.S. Open Cup information from. The website is thecup.us, and with us today we have the senior editor, the creator of all things U.S. Open Cup. If his name was Lamar Hunt, I would be lying because it's not, but he's pretty close to it. It's Josh Hakala, and he joins us on the program now. Josh, welcome to Let Me Be Forward, sir.
I'm glad to be here.
So, Josh, I got to jump right into it. Forward Madison, I feel like, is it too early, and I could be biased, but I almost want to hand them the Cinderella title because they've done some pretty big things so far here in the Open Cup.
Yeah, they certainly look that way, and they're $25,000 richer, which is the last remaining USL League One team. It's nice to have a Division III back in the tournament again, and I feel like there was always this gap, and not that there's like a massive gap between the teams. I think between a Division II and a Division III, right, there's a little bit, budgets and things like that, but it's nice to have a Division III pro league back in, because I think there are some markets that are just kind of perfect for a Division III. They're not quite one step away from MLS, but they're kind of medium-sized market. I think Lansing's a great one. Madison seems like it's a great one as well. So it kind of gives teams a proving ground to move up and grow their club.
Exactly right, and I think that's one thing you hit the nail on the head with. That Madison is not a professional sports market, but it does great at that second or third tier, like you mentioned, and I think that's something that I think the Flamingos kind of have on their side, honestly. But tell me a little bit about, from your perspective, the journey that we've seen so far. They have that unique experience of playing in Milwaukee for, they call it the Dairyland Derby against Bavarian SC, which we could spend a whole nother segment on because that was just a cool story just to have Bavarian a part of the tournament this year. But then They go and they just put this beat down on the El Paso Locomotive 3-0, and now they're staring St. Louis FC in the face. And I can't help but think, at least after the win last week, that this is a game that, although some people might say, well, they're the lower team, they shouldn't win this game. I said that on the air last week. I said Forward Madison is going to lose to El Paso, and I was very surprised but also very thankful to be wrong. Can I be wrong again? Can we see St. Louis lose?
It's certainly possible. Like I said, I don't think that there's a huge gap between the leagues, and some of the best Division III teams are just as good as even some of the mid-table Division II teams. So no, I definitely don't think that it's sadly we have to call it statistically an upset, but it's
right,
because it's division. Some of these things I write them down, and I know for a fact that Division III team was much better than the Division II team. But on paper, just to be consistent with our statistics and everything, we do technically call them upsets. But it's a huge game. I think divisions or round 3 is one of those rounds that people start to get a little bit more excited about the tournament, because you've weeded out some of the lower division clubs, but right now it's the main goal of the tournament for some of these lower division teams is to get a shot at a Major League Soccer team. And they're right on the doorstep. They've already got their 25,000, which is a nice bonus by itself. But to get a potential home game or even a road game or any kind of game with a Major League Soccer team, to put yourself on the field with a team from the top division is huge for a club. And I think that could be huge for a new club like yours. So I think that's really what I think people should be the most excited about. And they've had a nice run so far, beating a Bavarian team that one of the best amateur teams, and with all that history. And I think it was only the second all Wisconsin Open Cup game that we've had in the modern era. So that was kind of a neat thing. A great kind of a great, we'll say an appetizer for Open Cup fans, just to get the amateurs against the pros and get two teams that normally wouldn't play each other. But going on the road like that to beat El Paso, and not that I think El Paso is necessarily giant killers, but having to travel that far, you tend to give the advantage to the team that's at home and a team that's the higher division, and they pulled it off in a big way. So that was a nice win for them.
Give me your professional opinion about Forward Madison, because you've been around the game of soccer for a while. You've seen a lot of clubs come and go, but when you look at just what Forward Madison has done from your national lens, just looking at them, and I know, of course, you're not fully ingrained into it like I am and others that are closer to the team, but just give me your general perception of the club from what you've seen them do so far on and off the field.
Well, I think one of the things that they have, which and I say this about even like the open division teams too, but it applies to the pros as well, is to have that core of players that you want to have. The young talented players, obviously your bread and butters, but you want to have that core of veteran players. And having a player like, you look at Paulo Jr., who not only has experience at the professional level and playing everywhere, but also in the Open Cup too, and he's has one of those records that is not likely to be broken, or at least not anytime soon, where he scored 4 goals in extra time by himself. And so that is something that we probably won't ever. It's so rare that it's one of those things where if it ever comes around, we're gonna have to really look who was that did it before, and we're gonna find him when he was with Miami FC. I think that was in 2000. Off the top of my head, it was 2010. I think it was, but it was having a guy like that, I think. And you've got solid goalkeeping, players who've got solid. You've got a mix of veterans and good young talent as well to bring along, and I think that that's key. Your defense, obviously Christian Diaz had a really good game against El Paso. Mm-hmm. He was I don't know, he got my second place vote for player of the round. I thought that it was a tight vote this time around, and I thought him. It's sort of in a way, it was like a defensive team award, but he was kind of like the standout. He also scored the goal. That always gets voters' attention.
Of course.
And, I think he's a good veteran player for this team. And so you've got the young talent there, and you've got the mix of you got the veterans. And I think that could help you make a little bit of a cup run. So far, so good.
I agree. I have to get your prediction, Josh, before we let you go. Forward Madison, St. Louis FC, of course. Is this a game where Forward Madison has to go on the road again and get another victory? They saw St. Louis in the preseason. They lost 1-0 to them. It was one of their very first preseason games as a club. So they've got a little bit of tape on the team, which is helpful. But is this a game, in your mind, that Forward Madison can walk away with another victory?
I wouldn't be surprised, really. With some clubs and cup competitions, I think you need sort of a maybe a deeper set of examples. Like this is only their fifth cup, St. Louis. So they've been solid. They've won their opening round game every year. So they've been solid, and in the league they haven't been giant killers, but they again just been solid. So I don't think that I would be particularly afraid of them. They had a tough time against Des Moines. And granted, the Des Moines Menace are a very good, USL League Two team, and they got taken to penalty kicks. Granted, on the road and everything, but
sure.
But it's not a team that I'd be terrified of, and I think Forward Madison, they're a new club, and I think that they have a shot. So I'd say your chances. I don't think you need to worry about making any predictions that are going to be particularly embarrassing, because I think you could be confident in making that prediction that they could advance to play an MLS team. So maybe get a Chicago Fire in round 4. Who knows?
Exactly right, and that would be quite the storyline with the Peter Wilt connection as well if we got the Chicago Fire in round 4.
I think that's pretty much. I think that's one of those matchups that's it's just gonna happen.
Exactly.
If they get through, I feel like they're not doing a live video draw of the 4th round draw, so that might be one of those ones where they slip in the envelope and make that matchup happen, because that's too juicy of a storyline. Exactly right. All right, Josh, I appreciate the time, sir. If people want to learn more about you or your terrific organization that you've got running behind you, where can people find all that information? If you search for @US Open Cup with all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and we've got done for our Patreon account, so you can join us and support what we're doing and try to take our coverage to the next level. So we've got some good response from that, and we're easy to find at thecup.us and @US Open Cup. Fantastic. Josh Hakala, the editor-in-chief and founder of thecup.us. Always a pleasure, Josh. I appreciate the time this week. All right, thanks for having me. Time now for the Loon Report, your weekly look inside Forward Madison Partner Club Minnesota United. Well, the Loons this past weekend got a 1-0 victory, and it was one of those games where all you can do is just kind of shrug your shoulders and say, well, we won, and that's all that matters. Was it a cross? Was it a shot? No one really knows, but in the 20th minute, Minnesota got on the board thanks to a goal from Metaneri. And it was a funny goal, to say the least, but like I said, we saw Breck Shea do this a couple of years ago with his cross goal, and Metaneri doing it again, this time in beautiful fashion from the right side over to the left. That was the difference in this match as Minnesota United gets a 1-0 victory. The standings look a little bit different now as Minnesota United now creep up within 2 points of Houston, who they beat 1-0. They are now at 21 total points on the season, 3-0-3 at home. They've yet to lose a game at Allianz Field, so that's a big thing to know that the fortress of Allianz continues to be such a positive thing for them. Houston Dynamo just 2 points ahead of them with a record of 7-3-2. They have not been good on the road this year, hence how Minnesota United, of course, was able to take another victory. What's in store for the Loons this coming week? Well, they take on Atlanta United, so United battle that game in Atlanta on the 29th, 6 p.m. Central Time kickoff. That game, of course, taking place this evening. You can watch it on MLS Live
on ESPN+. Minnesota United continuing to try and find ways to continue to be one of the better teams in the Western Conference. Like I said, 5th place right now, so certainly on the ups, but still have some room to grow. And I think that after their 1-0 loss to Hertha Berlin on that international friendly, I think that that's a really cool growing thing that we can see from them. Dane St. Clair, forward Madison player, Wyatt Holmesburg, both got some time. Mason Toye also got some time. And I'm going to get into Toye a little bit later on in the program, but still, 2 good games from the Loons the past 2, losing 1-0 to Hertha and winning 1-0 against Houston Dynamo. That's your weekly check-in on Minnesota United, forward Madison's partner club, and that is your news report for this week.
Don't let me down. Don't let me down. Don't let me down.
As we look back on the past 3 matches for forward Madison, I can't help but scratch my head and say, what in the world is going on? Because going from a 6-game unbeaten streak to now all of a sudden losing the last 3 matches, I know one of them was an international friendly, but to still lose your 3rd match in a row is certainly concerning to me. They lose to Tormenta back on May 18th, 1-0. They lose to North Texas on the 22nd, 3-1. Then they go and they lose just 2 days later to Hertha Berlin 4-0. You've conceded 8 goals in the course of 3 matches, and you've only scored 1. And that's coming off of a 3-0 victory that they had against El Paso Locomotive back on May 15th. This is concerning to me because we are continuously seeing the enforcement of the fact that there is not a consistent forward on this team. Mason Toye is not the answer. I've talked about that many times. Paulo Jr., he is very creative, but he's dropped off. And then you look at who else? Don Smart, yeah, he was in the right place at the right time. He scored a goal, which was helpful, but it was more of a consolation prize because forward Madison looked silly against North Texas. They looked lost. They looked like they were not on the same page. As the old age-old saying goes, is forward Madison was playing checkers and North Texas was playing chess, and forward Madison got kinged before they even got out of the gate, as it was 2-0 within the first 10 minutes. There's a lot to still be said about forward Madison because they held Tormenta to just 1 goal. But then they go on the road and they just get absolutely beaten down, in my opinion. So I'm concerned right now. You're 2nd from the bottom and Orlando City is winning. So you're really a point away from Orlando as far as jumping over you and you falling backwards. And there's a couple of games coming up that really could tell a lot, honestly. June 1st is the game against Lansing, and then June 5th is a friendly against the Voyagers in Green Bay. That obviously doesn't make much of any sense. They should beat them pretty handily. June 7th, of course, you've got Orlando again, and then June 15th, you've got FC Tucson. So these next couple of games really are crucial for forward Madison to have any sort of movement in the standings. They were in the playoff standings just a couple of weeks ago, and now all of a sudden we see them plummeted down to 2nd from the bottom. I know it's a very simple league where you win 1 or 2 games and all of a sudden you're in the top 4, but we're getting to that point in the season where the top 4 teams are pulling away. And if forward Madison doesn't grab a win out of the next game or 2 in USL League One, they're going to have a lot longer road to get back into the top 4. I know all you have to do is at least get into the minimum of 4th place to make it to the playoffs, which of course is the goal for every team. But you have to score goals to even be considered to get into the playoffs. If you don't score goals, you're not going to win the games. And I know that sounds very cliche, but that's where we're at right now with forward Madison. They're not scoring goals in league games, and that's what's causing them to drop and drop and drop. You look at the last 5 games: draw, win, draw, lose, loss, loss. That's not going to win you a championship. That's not going to get you into the playoffs. Look at some of the higher teams up the ranks. There's a lot of losses scattered in here, but even still, Richmond Kickers, win, draw, win, loss, loss. South Georgia, loss, win, 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 draw. North Texas, of course, they're just a whole nother spectrum. We're not going to even talk about them. But there's that certain expectation that you have to have for this club. And I understand it's fun to be around. It's an amazing community. The flock is incredible. Daryl Shore, the players, everything is great. But at the end of the day, this is a results-driven business. And if you don't win matches, you don't get the perks that come along with that. You don't get the national recognition. And if you're not out there to try to win, if you're not out there to try to have a championship caliber roster, then what are you doing? You're wasting fans' time. You're wasting your time as an organization. So there needs to be some continued changes, and fans need to continue to be excited, but they need to be critical as well, because this team has so much potential, but it needs to keep getting pushed and it needs to keep getting supported, and the players need to keep getting held accountable as well. So the defense is in good standing. The goalkeeping spot is a little bit of a mess right now because Brian Silvestri, I feel like, has not been as solid as we were hoping he was going to be. And he's been letting goals in, and that's concerning because Ryan Coulter was not. And Daryl Shore, I feel like, has a tough decision to make here in the next couple of games. Do we possibly go back to Ryan Coulter in goal with the fact that Silvestri has had such a difficult time keeping the ball out of the back of the net? His defense hasn't certainly helped him because North Texas, didn't matter if there was 11 players or 14 players on the field, they were still going to win that game, and they were going to do it in beautiful fashion, which they did. And by the way, most of the guys aren't even 20 years old yet. That's the ridiculous part of it. And they made Forward Madison look silly. So there's a lot to be said about this game. There's a lot to be said about these teams. Forward Madison is definitely on the right track, but they certainly have some growing to do over the next couple of matches. We also talked about this on Twitter this week. This was the poll question. 530 of you voted this week on Twitter, so a big thank you to everyone. This is the largest poll we've ever ran. We asked the question, we said, will Forward Madison beat St. Louis FC Wednesday in the Open Cup? We said, heck yes, or flock no. And 65% of you said, heck yes. And I will be honest, I agree. I completely agree, especially after hearing what Josh Hakala had to say. And just, there's something that feels like this is going to be a breakthrough game. And St. Louis is nothing special. We almost beat them in preseason, and that was when these players barely knew each other. Now they've got this chemistry. Now they have this opportunity to step outside and win this game. And why not? You've got the underdog factor surging around. You've got the fact that you just pounded Locomotive into the ground last week 3-0. Who wouldn't be feeling like they had a solid shot at winning this match? I feel like it's going to be a tight game. I feel like it's going to be highly contested, but the stars are really aligning right now. I feel like we see Forward Madison win this game, and then I feel like we see them go and play the Chicago Fire next round just by some happenstance, of course. No one would ever assume that anybody would fix that game to happen the way it would, but let's be honest, we know that's what's going to happen. And I think that's where Forward Madison's run will end, is Chicago Fire beating them. But I like the fact of Forward Madison winning this match. I don't think they'll shut him out. I think St. Louis will jump on him early and they'll get a goal. And I think this is going to be a 2-1 game in favor of Forward Madison, but it's going to be late and it's going to be dramatic and it's going to be hard fought and not something that just happens for Forward Madison like it did last week, where they just kind of took the game to Locomotive and they didn't have an answer for him. St. Louis is a different club, and I think they're going to be a smarter, stronger, more physical club, and they're going to make Forward Madison earn every pass, every shot, and every goal. But at the end of the day, Forward Madison, in my opinion, takes the game in this one. As we wrap up the show this week, I do want to say a big thank you once again to our three incredible guests. Madeline took a chance to sit down with Jeff Michaud, as we mentioned. He was terrific, so a big shout out to Jeff for stopping by the program. Daryl Shore, of course, always just an amazing pleasure with him. And Josh Hakala as well from thecup.us, the editor-in-chief and creator over there. So a big thank you to him for stopping by the program. I really feel like Forward Madison is doing the right things, and I hope that you realize that my critiques and my forwardness with you is out of concern and care for this club. They've got a lot of good things going for them, and I feel like we've got a lot of things to be proud of as supporters, but at the same time, we need to make sure we take off those flamingo-colored glasses and be realistic at times as well, with where certain positions, certain players are not stepping up. So let's continue to support this club, but let's also continue to hold them to a high standard that we know that they're capable of doing. I appreciate you listening. If you want to keep up with the show, you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or publichousemedia.org, or wherever you get your podcasts. And a big thank you, of course, to Public House Media for sponsoring this episode. You can also head over to our Instagram, and there's a link in our bio that you can go and buy some swag of Let Me Before. We have t-shirts, cups, we have stickers, all kinds of fun stuff. or if you just go to tpublic.com and search for Let Me Be Forward. The show is on social media at Let Me Be Forward on all channels. I am at Baxter Colburn. You can find Madeline at Maddie Cum, MADDIEKUMM. For all of us here at Let Me Be Forward, thank you for listening, and go Mingos tonight against St. Louis FC.